My friends, there are moments in life when your heart breaks so deeply, it shakes the very foundation of your faith. Not because you didn't believe in love, but because you believed in it too much. You loved someone with all your might, gave with all your soul, hoped with every fiber of your being, only to be met with manipulation, control, coldness, and confusion. And somewhere in the quiet corners of your pain, you whispered a question to the heavens. Why, God? Why did you let me love someone like that? If you've ever asked that question, this message is for you. Because the truth is, God sees what we do not. He knows what lies beyond the surface. He understands what must happen within you before he brings you into what's destined for you. And sometimes in his divine wisdom, he allows the presence of a narcissist not to destroy your faith, but to deepen it. Not to punish you, but to build you. Today we're going to unpack the truth you were never told. We're going to reveal why your love was not a mistake and why God allowed it for a season to become the catalyst for your transformation. So open your heart, open your mind, because the truth you're about to hear is not just an explanation, it's a revelation. Love is often the training ground for purpose. Before you understood your calling, before you knew your own power, before you truly recognized your value, there was a moment where love led you, sometimes blindly, sometimes boldly, into a relationship that felt like destiny but became devastation. And even in that space, God was at work. What you thought was just emotion was actually education. You were not just loving someone, you were being taught, molded, and refined through the very process of loving. When God calls you into purpose, he doesn't just equip you with gifts and talent. He trains your heart. And nothing trains the heart like love. You see, it's easy to say you're strong until that strength is tested by someone who knows how to manipulate your kindness. It's easy to claim you're confident until you're connected to someone who constantly makes you doubt yourself. So God doesn't just prepare you in theory. He prepares you through experience. He lets your heart go through a journey so that your mind and spirit can grow stronger. You didn't fall in love by mistake. That love was allowed so that your soul could begin to mature. It showed you what it means to care beyond reason. It showed you your capacity for forgiveness. It revealed how deeply you're wired to heal, to help, and to hold space for another human being. But it also revealed where you were still broken, still uncertain, still in need of growth. Love teaches us things logic never can. And the pain that followed wasn't there to torment you. It was there to awaken you. You see, the pain didn't come to define you. It came to develop you. And even though you felt betrayed, used, and discarded, God was still in control of the process. He didn't abandon you in that love. He used that love to lead you into truth. Truth about who you are. Truth about what you need. Truth about what you must never again settle for. Because when you love a narcissist, your eyes start to open slowly, painfully, to the patterns. You begin to notice how your light is always being dimmed. How your needs are never prioritized. How your worth is constantly questioned. And in those revelations, God begins to whisper, this is not where your story ends. This is where it truly begins. The love was real, the connection was intense, but the pain it produced was purposeful. Because God knew that in order for you to step into your next level, you had to be broken from the cycle of emotional deception. You had to be taught that love without respect is manipulation. You had to learn that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. And sometimes the only way to truly learn those lessons is to live through them. Don't curse the love you gave. Don't regret the vulnerability you showed. Don't be ashamed of how much you tried. Because all of that was part of your preparation. You were not being punished. You were being prepared. You were not losing time. You were gaining wisdom. You were not just heartbroken. You were being positioned for healing that goes deeper than the wound. God doesn't waste love, and He surely doesn't waste the lessons that come with it. He knew that on the other side of this heartbreak, you'd carry a wisdom that can't be taught in books. You'd carry a voice of authority that only pain can produce. You'd carry a discernment that can spot deception from a mile away. And most of all, you'd carry a heart that is more grounded in truth and guarded in grace. You were trained through love so that you could recognize your assignment, so that you would understand people not from a place of naivete but from a place of clarity, so that your compassion wouldn't be careless but intentional. You were trained through love so that when God sends people who are truly aligned with your purpose, you will not question it, sabotage it, or miss it. You'll be ready. You'll be prepared. You'll be whole. And though it hurt, though it broke you, though it made you question everything, deep down, that season of loving the wrong person was not just heartbreak. It was a divine classroom, a spiritual awakening, a sacred stretching. It taught you how to value yourself, protect your peace, and trust God more than your feelings. Love was the lesson. Purpose was the result. God allows certain people in your life to reveal what is still broken in you. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about painful relationships, especially those that involve a narcissist. You see, we often think relationships are for companionship, for love, for partnership. And yes, they are. But there are moments in life when a relationship doesn't come to complete you, it comes to confront you. That's hard to swallow when you've poured your heart into someone who only drained it. But the lesson was never just about them. It was about you. So when you loved that narcissist, you thought you were being loyal. You thought you were being strong, patient, compassionate. And maybe you were. But what you didn't realize was that the way you kept loving, even when it hurt, wasn't just about them. It was exposing parts of you that you hadn't yet healed. Your desire to fix them, that wasn't just love. It was your hidden need to feel valuable. Your tolerance of their manipulation, that wasn't just grace. It was a reflection of your early conditioning, perhaps from childhood, where you learned to associate love with pain, chaos, or proving your worth. God will often permit a relationship with the narcissist not to torment you, but to uncover the wounds you've covered up with busyness, spirituality, or silence. He allows it because He loves you too much to let you walk into your destiny with unhealed scars. When you attract a narcissist, it's not because you're weak or naive. It's because you have empathy, depth, and emotional energy. But if that empathy has never been balanced with boundaries, it becomes a magnet for manipulation. That's where the divine lesson begins. Think about it. How many times did you see the red flags but ignore them? How many moments did your spirit whisper, something's wrong, but you overrode it with loyalty, fear of abandonment, or hope that things would change? That's not stupidity. that's a sign that parts of you needed restoration. You see, unhealed trauma will have you confusing intensity for intimacy. It will make you mistake control for protection. It will keep you loyal to dysfunction simply because it feels familiar. God allowed that relationship because he knew what it would surface. He knew it would bring out the root of rejection you never addressed. He knew it would shake loose the false beliefs you held about your value. He knew that one day you would finally wake up and say, I can't live like this anymore. And in that moment, you would begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself you lost. Not just in that relationship, but in all the places you were never taught how to protect your own heart. The narcissist didn't change you, they revealed you. They didn't break you, they exposed what was already fragile, and that exposure was the beginning of your healing. Sometimes we need to see what we've settled for in order to remember who we are. Sometimes we need to be devalued by others in order to recognize how deeply we've devalued ourselves. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. And God is the master of turning pain into perspective. You were not abandoned by God in that relationship. He was watching, not withholding. He was allowing the process, not punishing you. Because real healing isn't about pretending you're okay. It's about facing what's not okay and bringing it to the surface. That's what loving a narcissist did. It forced you to confront the very parts of yourself you never gave attention to. Your need to be chosen, your fear of being alone, your habit of overgiving just to feel seen. And once those patterns came to light, God didn't leave you there. He began the process of making you whole. That's why you're here right now, searching for answers, asking deeper questions, reclaiming your identity. This is not the end of your story. It's the turning point. The narcissist was just a tool in the hands of the master to show you where you still needed healing. And now that you've seen it, now that you've walked through the fire, you can step into relationships with clarity, with discernment, with standards born out of self-worth, not insecurity. You don't need to regret that love. You need to redeem it. Take the lesson, take the awareness, take the strength you found in the middle of the chaos and use it. That's how God works. He doesn't waste pain. He uses it to transform the very people who were once buried under it. You were never weak for loving them, but you are now wise enough to never allow that kind of love to diminish you again, because what God showed you through them wasn't just about the darkness in others. It was about the light He's trying to ignite in you. You don't grow through comfort. You grow through contrast. It is not the gentle waters that make a sailor skilled. It is the storm, the chaos, the waves that refuse to calm. In the same way, it is not the loving people who teach you the depth of your boundaries. It's the ones who violate them. And that's exactly what happened when you loved the narcissist. You entered a situation expecting warmth and were handed emotional. You gave empathy and received entitlement. You poured out honesty and got deception. But all of that wasn't wasted. It was a curriculum of contrast, a divine class in what love is not. Contrast is God's way of clarifying vision. You would not know how dark a room truly is unless you had first seen the light. And many of us would not recognize healthy love unless we had first encountered the toxic version. That's why the narcissist didn't just hurt you. They revealed something to you. They showed you what love doesn't look like. They taught you what not to tolerate, what not to excuse, what not to dismiss, as normal. And in that way, they became an unwilling teacher in the school of your spiritual awakening. Sometimes God uses pain as a platform to open your eyes. Loving the narcissist hurt, but it was in that hurt that you began to see clearly. You saw your own tendency to overextend. You saw your desire to rescue someone who had no desire to be healed. You saw how much you were trying to earn what should have been given freely. And suddenly, things you once called love, you began to question. You began to ask, is love supposed to feel like this? That question was the beginning of your liberation. Because real growth doesn't begin when things go right. It begins when you realize what's wrong. The contrast of loving a narcissist exposed your definition of love. You thought love was self-sacrifice, constant patience, never giving up no matter what. But in that relationship, God showed you that love without boundaries is not love. It's self-betrayal. Love without truth is not devotion. It's distortion. What you thought was noble endurance was really silent suffering. And God never called you to that. This contrast also awakened your spiritual discernment. When you were in the relationship, everything seemed confusing. Your emotions were tangled, your thoughts scattered, your confidence shaky. But when you stepped back, clarity started flooding in. That's the power of contrast. You didn't realize how chaotic it was until you experienced peace. You didn't know how fake it was until you found something genuine. The narcissist gave you contrast, and the contrast gave you vision. But here's where the miracle really unfolds. The contrast created a new standard. You no longer settle for the bare minimum. You're no longer impressed by charm, flattery, or fake spirituality. Now you test the fruit, not just the words. You watch patterns, not promises. You value peace over passion, truth over talent, character over charisma. And all of that came from the contrast. What broke your heart built your wisdom. What confused you then equips you now. That relationship, as painful as it was, refined your instincts. You don't ignore red flags anymore. You don't negotiate your worth anymore. You no longer feel the need to prove your value to someone committed to misunderstanding you. And that strength didn't come from comfort. It came from contrast, from being in a relationship that starved your soul until you were desperate enough to find your way back to yourself and back to God. Contrast doesn't feel good in the moment. In fact, it often feels like betrayal, but over time you come to see it was actually revelation. God was showing you what to never go back to, what to never allow again, what to recognize in others and heal in yourself. And that contrast will stay with you for the rest of your life. Not as a wound, but as wisdom. It becomes the reason you walk differently, speak differently, choose differently. It becomes your inner compass, guiding you not through fear, but through divine clarity. So if you're still grieving, still questioning, still wondering why you had to go through all of it, understand this. You grew. You expanded. You awakened. The very relationship that tried to shrink you ended up enlarging your understanding. You walked through fire, but came out forged. And now, you don't just know what you want, you know what you'll never accept again. It was contrast that taught you the value of real love. It was contrast that made you fall back in love with peace. It was contrast that helped you see that God's way of love is gentle, kind, healing, and whole. And that, more than anything, is why the experience mattered. not because they changed, but because you did. Painful love experiences refine your identity. You cannot know the strength of your character until your heart has been tested by disappointment. You cannot define your boundaries until someone has consistently crossed them. And you don't discover your true worth until you've given your best to someone who treated it like it was disposable. The journey of loving a narcissist, though heartbreaking, becomes one of the most profound revelations of who you are and who you were never meant to be again. When you first entered that relationship, you may have thought you were strong. But strength that is untested is only potential. Real strength is proven under pressure. Loving a narcissist puts pressure on the very core of your being, on your patience, your values, your sense of truth, your identity. And what happens over time is not simply heartbreak, it's transformation. The version of you that tolerated deception, begged for validation, questioned your instincts, and accepted mistreatment begins to crumble. And in its place, God begins to reveal the real you, the strong you, the discerning you, the version of you that is no longer tied to people's approval, but is rooted in divine truth and identity. You see, a narcissist doesn't just mistreat you, they challenge your sense of self. They introduce confusion where there was clarity. They create chaos where there was peace. And if you're not anchored, you begin to morph into someone you don't even recognize. You start walking on eggshells, you silence your voice, you suppress your needs, and without realizing it, you begin to shrink. But here's the beauty in all of it. God doesn't let you stay small. Even in the pain, He's awakening something inside you. The very mistreatment that made you question your value is the same pressure that forces you to redefine it. That's why people often emerge from narcissistic relationships with a deep hunger for healing and self-discovery. Because in trying to hold on to a toxic love, they lost themselves. And the restoration journey becomes less about getting over them and more about finding me. You begin to look inward, not outward. You start confronting old wounds that made you susceptible to manipulation. You revisit your childhood, your belief systems, your expectations of love, and every layer you peel back is a step closer to the person God always intended you to be. This kind of growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens through contrast. God allowed the counterfeit so you could crave the authentic. He allowed the pain so you could value peace. He allowed the manipulation so you could hunger for truth. The narcissist didn't just break your heart, they broke the illusion you were living under. The illusion that love should hurt, that your needs don't matter, that staying silent makes you strong, that sacrifice means accepting suffering. No, those lies were passed down through pain, but God used a greater pain to destroy them once and for all. Your identity is not who you were in that relationship. Your identity is who you became after it. It's the voice you reclaimed. It's the standards you raised. It's the boundaries you set and now protect. You became someone who no longer begs for crumbs because you know you bring the feast. You became someone who no longer waits to be chosen because you know you were already called. You no longer trade your peace for their approval. You don't measure your worth by their moods. You've learned that the God who made you is the only one qualified to define you. This experience, as painful as it was also prophetic. It prophesied a new version of you. One who has wisdom, not just wounds. One who can teach others not just from a textbook, but from testimony. Your scars have turned into sacred evidence that you endured what others didn't see and rose anyway. You learned to love yourself the way you tried to love them. You gave yourself the attention, grace, and loyalty you once poured out freely. And now that love, refined by pain, matured by truth, has become powerful. So never let the enemy convince you that your past with a narcissist was a waste. No, God never wastes pain. Every tear you cried, every night you stayed up wondering what was wrong with you, every prayer you whispered asking for peace, those moments were not lost. They were recorded, and heaven was working even when you couldn't see it. You didn't just survive that relationship, you resurrected. You came out wiser, stronger, bolder, and more rooted in your God-given identity than ever before. And now, your story is a weapon. Your voice is a tool. Your healing is a testimony, not because you were lucky, but because you were called. Called to rise, called to remember who you are, and called to never settle for anything less again. The love you gave was not wasted. It was seed. Every act of kindness, every moment of grace, every ounce of patience you extended to the narcissist may have felt like it vanished into a void, but in truth, it was a divine investment. Love is never lost in God's economy. What you gave was not just affection, it was purpose in motion. And though it may seem that the narcissist took and never gave, that your heart poured out without return, you must understand that in the kingdom of God, nothing sown in sincerity goes without a harvest. You may feel foolish for loving someone who couldn't see you, couldn't appreciate you, couldn't return even a fraction of the depth you carried. But what you must realize is that your capacity to love them was not weakness. It was evidence of your spiritual strength. You weren't called to imitate them. You were called to reveal what love should be. Your love stood as a contrast in a place of chaos. It was light in darkness. And while they may have rejected that light, the heavens recorded every drop you poured out. You see, seeds don't grow the day they're planted. They grow after they've been buried, after they've endured darkness, after time has passed. The love you gave wasn't in vain. It simply hasn't finished producing yet. Some of the fruit you're about to see in your life didn't begin with a celebration. It began with heartbreak. It began with tears on your pillow and silent prayers for strength. It began with the agony of holding on and the courage it took to finally let go. But every tear was water for the seed. Every prayer was light. Every sleepless night was pressure, forming the roots of something deeper within you. God saw your faithfulness in the face of betrayal. He saw your loyalty when it wasn't returned. He saw how you kept showing up when others would have walked away. And while man may overlook your heart, God honors it. Your seed is sacred to him. Love given in truth always returns, even if not from the one you gave it to. In fact, many times the harvest of your love shows up in places you didn't expect. It shows up in future relationships where you finally receive what you once gave. It shows up in the wisdom you now walk in. It shows up in your purpose being ignited. It shows up in your voice, your courage, your identity. There's a divine exchange happening that you might not have seen yet. Because while the narcissist was using you for supply, God was using the situation for your supply. It was fertilizer for your soul. You were being deepened. You were being purified. You were being strengthened for what's coming next. What felt like a breaking was really a planting. And now, because of what you've survived, you carry authority. You have insight now. You can spot manipulation. You can sense dishonesty. You've become wise, not bitter. Guarded, not closed. Empowered, not broken. And here's the irony. The narcissist thought they were depleting you, but they were actually unlocking you. They didn't know they were pressing on purpose. They didn't know they were unsealing spiritual gifts. They didn't know that the more they rejected you, the more heaven was accepting you. The more they used you, the more God was preparing you to be used by Him. The pain pushed you into a deeper awareness of yourself and your Creator. It brought you to your knees, but not in defeat, in surrender. It stripped away illusions. It peeled back false expectations. It shattered the idol of human love so you could be anchored in divine love. That's not loss. That's transformation. So don't regret the love you gave. That love was holy. That love was rare. That love was you. And the right people, the people God is sending next, will honor it. They will cherish it. They will water what the narcissist tried to trample, because what you gave was never ordinary. It was kingdom. It carried weight. It carried healing. It carried life. And now that love is returning to you, not in the same way, not from the same source, but in a new form. Overflowing, pressed down, and shaken together. Your harvest is coming. The seed did not die. It was planted. And now it will rise, just like you, just like your purpose, just like the next season God has prepared. God doesn't send narcissists, but He uses them. That truth alone has set many people free. Because for years you may have believed that God orchestrated your pain, that He handpicked someone to mistreat you, that He was behind the very thing that nearly shattered your soul. But the wisdom of God is deeper than your wounds, and His purpose is larger than your past. While God may not have offered the narcissist's character, He certainly is the master of using broken vessels to reveal divine intentions. When a narcissist enters your life, it often feels like chaos wrapped in charm. At first they seem like an answered prayer. They say the right things, do the right things, and reflect back to you a version of love that feels magnetic. But over time, the light fades and the truth begins to surface. You start to see the manipulation, the gaslighting, the emotional neglect. You begin to doubt your worth, your mind, and even your calling. And in that silent agony, you wonder how a loving God could allow someone so toxic to touch your life. The answer is this: God did not send them, but He permitted their presence because He saw what you couldn't. He saw a sleeping warrior inside of you that needed to be awakened. He saw emotional muscles that needed resistance in order to grow. He saw potential that comfort could never pull out, but pain would. And so He didn't stop them from entering your life, not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He wanted you to see the weak spots in your soul, to see the lies you believed about love, to see the broken patterns you inherited or never healed from, to see how deeply you were neglecting yourself while trying to be everything for someone else. Just like God used Pharaoh to raise up Moses, just like He used Judas to push Jesus to the cross, He can use narcissists to activate the purpose within you. Their cruelty becomes a clarifier. Their neglect becomes a revealer. Their selfishness becomes the contrast that teaches you what real love actually looks like. They become a tool in the hands of God, not because they are righteous, but because He is sovereign. When you walk through that relationship, you weren't just being hurt, you were being humbled, you were being refined, you were learning the voice of God in a way that you never needed to before. You were learning the strength of silence, the necessity of boundaries, the value of self-love, and the cost of peace. You are learning that love is not proven by pain, that sacrifice does not mean self-erasure, that hope is not denial, that forgiveness does not mean allowing repeated access to your heart. And maybe, just maybe, the narcissist was a disguised assignment, an uninvited teacher that delivered a lesson no comfort ever could. That lesson wasn't just for you to survive, it was for you to lead, to teach, to counsel, to discern. Because after you come through the fire, you don't just emerge stronger, you emerge anointed. You emerge able to recognize manipulation before it speaks. You emerge able to comfort others with the comfort you yourself received. You emerge with spiritual eyes that can see wolves in sheep's clothing from a mile away. You emerge equipped for destiny. Understand, the enemy wants you to believe that your past with the narcissist disqualifies you. But God is whispering something different, that it qualified you. Because you've walked through a depth of emotional trauma that few understand. And survived. You have learned what it means to love and not be loved back. To give and be drained, to hope and be disappointed. And still, here you are. Healing, growing, rebuilding. But God is a redeemer. He doesn't waste anything, not your tears, not your time, not even your trauma. What was meant to destroy you will become your testimony. What was meant to break your spirit will be the very thing that builds your voice. What was meant to isolate you will be the reason you find intimacy with Him like never before. You may not understand it all right now, and that's okay. Healing is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. And when you look back one day, you will see it clearly. The narcissist wasn't your destiny, they were your doorway. They were the resistance that built your resolve. They were the betrayal that pushed you into truth. They were the counterfeit that made room for the authentic. No, God didn't send them, but He surely used them. And because of that, you will never be the same again. You're wiser now, stronger, sharper, and more aware of who you are and whose you are. The battle was fierce, but the breakthrough is holy. And the you that is emerging on the other side is more powerful, more purposeful, and more prepared than ever before. Loving a narcissist is like walking into a storm thinking you can calm the wind. You come with peace, with kindness, with pure intent. You offer your heart not because you're desperate, but because you believe love is meant to heal, to uplift, to unify. But what happens when the very person you love sees that purity as weakness? What happens when the love you extend becomes the weapon used to control you, diminish you, confuse you? That's where the lesson begins. Because in that chaos, something ancient and powerful begins to stir within you. Not just anger, not just grief, but recognition. A deep inner awareness that this pattern feels strangely familiar. The way they devalue you, the way they manipulate your kindness, the way you keep trying to fix what you didn't break. Somewhere deep inside, it feels like a wound has been ripped open not by their actions alone, but by the way their behavior echoes voices you've heard long before they arrived. This is the truth most people don't want to face. Loving a narcissist doesn't just break your heart. It awakens your trauma. It resurrects the parts of your past you buried. The childhood voids, the emotional neglect, the desperate need to prove that you're lovable, worthy, enough. And while it feels cruel in the moment, there is a divine strategy in this awakening. You see, healing does not begin when life is quiet. Healing begins when pain speaks so loudly you can no longer silence it. That relationship, painful as it was, acted like a spotlight on everything you thought you had gotten over. You didn't realize how much you were still hurting until their behavior magnified it. You didn't know how much you tolerated dysfunction until they kept crossing your boundaries. You didn't know how badly you needed closure from your past until they reopened every door you thought was sealed shut. And this is why God allowed it. Not to punish you, not to humiliate you, not to strip you of confidence, but to finally get you to see what needed to be healed. Sometimes it takes a toxic person to reveal a toxic belief. Sometimes it takes rejection to show you how deeply you've abandoned yourself. Sometimes it takes emotional abuse to force you to ask, why do I keep accepting this? And when you ask that question, not from bitterness, but from reflection, you begin to see the roots. You see that the narcissist didn't create the pain. They activated it. They stirred the parts of your soul that were silently bleeding for years. They pushed buttons you didn't know existed. And while they must be held accountable for their behavior, you must be willing to ask yourself the harder question. Why was I available for it? That answer doesn't come from shame. It comes from a hunger for wholeness. Because the moment you stop blaming them and start learning from the experience, you begin to reclaim your power. The same power they tried to manipulate, the same voice they tried to silence, the same soul they tried to devalue. You begin to rise, slowly at first, but then boldly. You realize that what they called too emotional was actually deep empathy. What they labeled crazy was your God-given discernment. What they mocked as overreacting was your spirit rejecting dishonor, and suddenly you no longer hate yourself for loving them. You thank God that love woke you up. Because now you see, now you recognize the unhealed child within you who never felt safe. Now you understand why certain patterns kept repeating. Now, you know what true love should feel like and what it must never be. Now you're rebuilding from truth, not trauma. And here's the most beautiful part. God doesn't waste anything. Not your tears, not your confusion, not even your time. What you thought was a setback was actually a setup. That love, as painful as it was, served a holy purpose. It turned your wounds into wisdom. It turned your survival into strength. It turned your silence into testimony. So no, you weren't crazy for loving them. You were ready. Ready to heal, ready to confront, ready to grow. The narcissist came into your life like a thief, but God used them like a teacher. They taught you what self-worth looks like by violating it. They taught you what boundaries feel like by crossing every one. And now you walk differently. You speak differently. You love differently. Not from desperation, but from discernment. Because once you've seen your own wounds, once you've honored your own pain, once you've done the work of healing, you will never again allow someone to love you in fragments. You will require wholeness not games. Respect, not performance. Authenticity, not charm. And all of that started when God allowed that experience to awaken what was buried. So don't curse the moment you met them. Thank God for the clarity it brought. Thank Him for the awakening. Because what the enemy meant for harm, God is now using for your wholeness. Your love for them was part of your anointing process. You thought it was just a relationship, just a connection, just someone you felt drawn to. But in the eyes of heaven, it was a classroom. It was an altar. It was a fire through which your oil would be pressed. The love you gave to that narcissist was not random. It was intentional. Because before God trusts you with greater influence, deeper spiritual gifts, and the weight of your purpose, He allows your heart to be tested in places that look like weakness, but are actually preparation. You didn't just fall in love with a person, you fell into a divine setup. A season where your patience, your kindness, your mercy, and your long-suffering were stretched beyond your human ability. And even though it felt unfair, it was necessary. Because real authority in the Spirit doesn't come from popularity. It comes from pain. It doesn't come from applause. It comes from endurance. The narcissist couldn't see your worth because they were never meant to affirm it. They were only meant to trigger it. They were only meant to awaken the you that you didn't even know was inside you. That experience was your oil press. The betrayal was your crushing. The emotional chaos was your pruning. And through it all, God was watching. Not to see if you would win the relationship, but to see if you would win yourself back. The moment you chose healing over attachment, growth over guilt, self-respect over obsession, that was when the anointing began to stir. That was when heaven said, now I can trust them. Because love is one of the most dangerous tools in the wrong hands. And the enemy tried to use your love to destroy you. But God flipped it. He used your love to deliver you, to awaken your spiritual sight, to unlock your next season. Every tear you cried was watering a future harvest. Every time you forgave what seemed unforgivable, you were qualifying for spiritual authority. Every moment you walked in integrity while they walked in manipulation, you were climbing in the spirit realm. And every time you resisted the urge to stoop to their level, heaven was recording it. That love taught you to hear God more clearly. It forced you into prayer when you were isolated. It caused you to fast, to reflect, to examine your soul in ways you never would have if things were perfect. The narcissist thought they had power because they controlled the relationship. But the real power was in your capacity to love anyway. Your love did not make you weak. It proved your strength. It proved that no matter how dark the environment, the light inside of you was still burning. And the reason that experience hurt so deeply is because it was connected to your divine assignment. You couldn't walk into your next without first walking through that. The truth is, your love wasn't for them. It was for you. It was for who you would become through it. The version of you that can now discern toxic behavior quickly. The version of you that no longer begs to be seen because you see yourself. The version of you that's no longer confused by emotional manipulation because you've been refined by truth. The anointing comes through these crucibles. It comes when you choose healing over hatred, growth over revenge, purpose over pain. And now, look at you. Still standing, still growing, still loving, even with scars. You're not bitter. You're better. You're not angry. You're anchored. You've learned how to keep your softness and still guard your soul. You've learned how to forgive without reattaching. You've learned how to protect your peace without apologizing for it. That's the anointing. That's the oil. That's the beauty for ashes. And God says, now you're ready. Now you're strong. Now you're prepared for what I really wanted to give you all along. Because before he gives you influence, he checks your heart. Before he promotes you, he purifies you. And sometimes the purification comes through people who try to poison your destiny. But what the enemy meant for evil, God has turned for your good. So don't regret loving them. Don't regret the season. Don't regret the lessons. Because it was all part of the making of the one. And when you look back, you realize it wasn't just heartbreak. It was holy. It wasn't just love. It was legacy. It wasn't just pain. It was preparation. That's why God let you love a narcissist. Because he was raising up someone not just to survive, but to carry power, wisdom, and healing for others. You had to feel it to free others from it. You had to walk through it so you could walk others out of it. Your anointing didn't come from the crown, it came from the crushing. And now you rise.